Every so often, the lectionary provides us with some readings that are challenging. And I will share with you, I always start my sermon prep, a few weeks out before I actually give the sermon. And I got to this a couple weeks ago, and I started reading through the readings, and I was just like, oh my, here we go. I've often struggled with this reading because it shows a side of Jesus we don't usually see very often. We have this ideology of Jesus, the good shepherd, and he was lovely and a big fluffy beard, and he loved everybody, and, he turned the other way, water into wine, and these romantic ideologies about Jesus. And then we hear this gospel story where he made whips out of cords and was flipping over tables. And I had a colleague of mine and I were talking on the phone this week, and he said, this gospel story reminds us that it's okay to have a meltdown every once in a while. But what was happening here? So our Jewish brothers and sisters have a time of preparation in the table before Passover. Ironically, it's a lot like what we're doing for Easter. It is a time of self-reflection and purification, and often it was the time when the Jewish people would go and offer sacrifice at the temple. Well, for a lot of people, they would go to the temple, and there was this convenience store pretty much ideology, and you could buy your doves to sacrifice, or you could buy what you needed to buy in order to go and offer your sacrifice. But it wasn't in the most ethical way. Have you ever gone to buy milk at a grocery store and then try and go buy milk at a gas station? There's a little bit of a price difference. And that's what was happening in this situation. People were being charged a significant amount more money and being kind of taken by these money changers and these people selling the doves and what have you. So there was kind of this unethicalness of that in the beginning to start us off. But there's this other component that I want to dive deeper into today, and it is the sense of turning the temple into a marketplace. People were going to this temple to be purified, to have these moments with God in a very specific, beautiful way where it was only supposed to be about God and them, not this other stuff. And there were people who were capitalizing on that. And in some ways, we can use the term that it was made unclean because of these business dealings that were happening. It was no longer about coming to offer prayer and to be purified in preparation for Passover. It was about making money and how to grow one's wealth. And it made me kind of think about the concept of sacred places. Jesus was trying to show that if you don't have respect for this sacred place, these things can't happen. This is holy ground, and we would not want to profane it in any way. And it kind of made me think about sacred space. And where do I go for my sacred spaces? One of the gifts that I have been given in this time of quarantine was this spring and summer, I found one of my sacred places. It's on my deck. And if you saw my pictures on Facebook, I turned my deck from being, this wooden barren land into flowers and plants and trees, and I turned it into this lovely oasis. And every morning I would get up, turn the coffee on, and go outside and just sit on my deck and allow the sun to feed my soul, to hear the birds chirping, the dogs barking, the kids playing in the park right behind my house. And it became a place where I came and found God. I didn't have my cell phone. I didn't have my computer. It was the place I would pray. It was the place I would meditate upon. It was the place, for me, was a thin space between me and God. And then after about an hour, I would then bring my computer outside and start my workday. And then once that computer came out, well, then it didn't become as much of a thin space anymore. But what I learned quickly was that I needed to have a space where I could come and encounter the divine. And that I had to hold that space because there were so many things in the world around me that would have taken it up if I would have allowed it to. I spent many an hours on my deck. I watched the events of this summer with George Floyd's murder and the aftermath of what happened from my deck. I watched the majority of our early political issues happening from that deck. And it gave me the opportunity to look up to heaven and say, God, I don't know what to do right now. Or it invited me into prayer, or it invited me into some self-reflection that sometimes was pretty messy. And I protected that space, and I cared for that space. I'd go out every morning and water my plants, and, Lance would come out and talk to me, and I'd be like, go away. This is my time with God. The dogs would come out and annoy me, but there's not much you can do about those. But I held that space and I protected that space because I didn't want anything to separate me or get in the way of my time with God. Do we hold space for God, and do we protect that space? It's so easy in our world around us because our attention and the media and everything around us is telling us different things that we should pay attention to. It is so hard to maybe give that space for God. But I wonder if our gospel might be talking to us in a way about holding that space and keeping it holy. Do you have a place that is just for you and God? Do you have a place that you can go to and pray? Now, I'm saying you can pray from anywhere, but sometimes it's nice to have that dedicated space. There are many people who have prayer corners or prayer chairs or, what have you. Unfortunately, my deck being my prayer space makes it very difficult in January. So I have, I have the winter version and then the summer version, of where I go to pray. But I challenge you to find that place that feeds your soul. I'll share with you, my spirit's been pretty troubled the last couple months. I've been feeling a little spiritually empty on the inside. And I realized the other day, part of it is because I miss my deck. I haven't been paying attention to that as much. So I went outside and I shoveled the last bit of the snow in preparation. I moved the table at least to where it can be. I haven't quite been out there yet. I think this afternoon there's some time I'm going to spend on my deck. But I realized how much I missed that space because I didn't have that time with God. I had allowed my life, I had allowed my schedule, I had allowed all these things that I'm doing to remove me from that space. And when I'm not in prayer, when I'm not in meditation, and I'm not saying this is only for clergy, I find myself missing something. So find your sacred place. Find that place that you can be with God. The next thing I want to talk about, I really struggled on what to say. And I was going to do this in an announcement, but I decided to do this now. This week begins the trial of Mr. Chauvin and the trial about the murder of George Floyd. I struggle with this because I have those emotions I had again this summer. And all of that kept digging up, and it's coming and churning inside. I wish I could tell you as your priest what to do to make this all work out right, or to feel okay on the inside, but I don't. The most I can encourage you to do is hold this in prayer. Hold the tension. Hold your uneasiness. Hold maybe those ideologies that we have inside that we don't really want to admit to. Hold that in prayer. But I also think there's another opportunity for us. You all know by now I tend to preach a lot of 12-step spirituality. And there is a, practice that we have in 12-step spirituality is whenever we feel uneasy or we're having a hard time with something, it always says, go and help another alcoholic. Maybe our challenge is to go and help another human being in this time. I will be on Monday with a group of clergy down at George Floyd Square handing out food and kind of bringing in community and holding prayer space for people who want to come and pray as the trial begins. Go and give a hand to somebody, because I think our entire world right now is hurting. We're all uneasy. We're all unsure of what's happening. Let us respond to the uneasy feeling with kindness and love. Let us extend our hands in friendship, knowing that we have a world that has a lot of work to do on this. Let us extend hands of love and of peace and of understanding and of welcome to counter the hate, to counter the unwillingness to learn about one another. And most of all, I offer you all, if you need a space to come and pray, come here. Or pick up the phone. I'm happy to talk with you. This is a very uneasy time. So I challenge you this morning to hold it in prayer. And I wish I had more powerful words. I wish I had more that I could offer. But the most I can offer right now is to hold each other in prayer. Hold the family of George Floyd in your prayers. Hold the family of Officer Chauvin in your prayers. And I know this is going to sound difficult, but hold Officer Chauvin in your prayer. And most of all, be kind to one another and love one another. Because that is what God asks of us. Amen.